The sun hung low over the rolling prairie when I finally reached the long dirt road leading to the ranch. Evening light stretched across the open fields like liquid gold, turning every blade of grass into a thin shining wire. My car tires kicked up dust behind me as I drove slowly, unsure if I was even going the right way. Out here, roads didn't have signs. You had to trust memory, instinct, and whatever directions were spoken in that slow western drawl the cowboy had used earlier that afternoon. I had met him only once before, briefly, almost by accident. I was visiting the small nearby town for a few days, trying to escape the noise and confusion of city life, and he had been at a tiny local store picking up feed and tools. His presence had been impossible to miss. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who spent more time under the open sky than under a roof. His weathered hat shadowed eyes that were warm but observant, and when he glanced at me, it felt like he saw more than most people ever bothered to look for. He'd heard me asking the shopkeeper where I could find a good place to watch an old Western film, the kind that only older locals seem to keep on dusty shelves. Without hesitation he'd said, "I got a copy. And a TV that works. If you ain't got other plans tonight, you're welcome to watch it at my place." I had agreed before I even asked myself why I was so quick to accept. Now, driving through the last stretch of his land, I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. There was something about him, something calm, grounded, and steady, that drew me in. I didn't know what I expected from tonight. Maybe nothing. Maybe just company. Maybe a moment of peace. The ranch house appeared over a small hill, simple but solid, with wide wooden beams and a porch lined with old rocking chairs. A single yellow porch light glowed under the darkening sky. The door opened before I even stepped out of the car. He stood there, framed by the soft light behind him, wearing the same hat, the same worn jeans, the same button shirt with sleeves rolled just enough to show strong forearms. His presence almost pulled the air around him into stillness. "You made it," he said with a small smile, gentle, almost relieved. "Yeah," I replied, brushing dust off my clothes. "Hope I'm not late." "There ain't no late out here," he said with a quiet laugh. "Come on in." I followed him onto the porch, my footsteps echoing lightly against the wooden planks. As he opened the door wider, the warm scent of cedar, old books, and something faintly like coffee drifted out to greet me. The inside of the house felt exactly like I imagined a cowboy's home would, simple, warm, and lived in. Worn leather boots sat by the door, a coat hung on a hook, and pictures of horses and open landscapes decorated the walls. "TV's in my room," he said casually. "Best place in the house to watch a movie. The one in the living room's old enough it barely shows a picture." I nodded, though part of me felt a little flutter at the idea of being in his space, his private space. But he said it so naturally, with no edge of awkwardness, that my nerves eased. He walked ahead of me, boots thudding softly against the wooden floor. His room was at the end of a hallway, lit by a warm lamp on a small table. It was simple, neatly made bed, a few folded shirts on a chair, a shelf of old Western DVDs, and a surprisingly large TV mounted on the wall. A small window overlooked the darkening fields outside, where the sky was deep blue fading into black. "This okay?" he asked, glancing back at me. "It's perfect," I said honestly. He nodded and stepped inside, and as I followed, he reached back and gently pushed the door closed behind us. Not abruptly, not forcefully, just a quiet click that sealed the room in a soft bubble of privacy. The lamp cast warm shadows across the walls, and for a moment, we stood there without speaking, letting the quiet settle. "You look a little nervous," he said with a slow smile. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "It's peaceful here. I'm not used to quiet." He chuckled. "Most folks ain't. Takes time to get used to hearing your own thoughts." He walked to the shelf, picked out the movie we talked about earlier, and slid it into the player. As he did, I found myself watching the way he moved, deliberate, unhurried. Every gesture held a certain steadiness, like he'd lived long enough not to waste energy on anything unnecessary. "You want something to drink before we start?" he asked. "Water's fine," I replied. He left briefly and returned with 2 glasses, setting one on the bedside table beside me. When he sat on the edge of the bed to grab the remote, the mattress dipped slightly, and the small shift of weight sent a subtle warmth toward my side. "Sit," he said with a soft tilt of his head. I sat beside him, a careful distance away, though even that space felt charged with quiet awareness. The movie started playing, but for the first several minutes, neither of us really watched it. I could feel his presence next to me, solid, steady, comforting in a way I didn't expect from someone I barely knew. He noticed me glancing around the room and said, Ain't much to it, but it's home. It feels safe, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes settled on me, warm and thoughtful. That's good. You can relax here. And somehow I believed him. As the film played on, our shoulders drifted closer, not touching yet, but close enough that the warmth of his body brushed the edge of mine. The room felt smaller, softer, like the world outside had melted away. His voice, when he occasionally made a quiet comment about the movie, came out low and rough, filling the space between us like a gentle hum. I didn't know what tonight would lead to. I didn't need to. For the first time in months I felt still, felt seen. The cowboy leaned back slightly, his shoulder nearly touching mine, and said in a quiet tone, "You can come here anytime you need a break from the world." I smiled, feeling something inside me loosen. I might take you up on that. The movie played on, but the real story was unfolding in the quiet space between us, in the flickering shadows, the warmth of the room, and the unspoken sense that something unexpected and gentle had begun the moment I walked into his home. The movie flickered across the screen, washing the room in shifting tones of gold and blue. Outside, the prairie night had settled fully, deep, quiet, and endless. Inside, the small glow of the lamp painted soft shadows across the cowboy's room, blurring the edges of everything until the space felt almost unreal. Still, the strongest thing I felt was his presence beside me. He leaned back a little, legs stretched out, one arm resting loosely over his knee. Even relaxed, he carried the kind of quiet strength that made the room feel grounded. I found myself watching the way the lamplight warmed the lines of his face, the faint roughness of stubble along his jaw, the small tiredness in his eyes that hinted at long days and longer memories. "You cold?" he asked suddenly, his voice low and soft. I blinked, realizing I had been sitting a little too stiffly. "Maybe just a little," I admitted. He reached behind him and pulled a blanket from the foot of the bed. It was thick, soft, and faintly smelled of cedar and sun, the scent of his home. He held it out to me first, but when I hesitated, he shifted slightly closer, draping it gently over both of us at once. "There," he murmured. "Better." The warmth spread instantly, not just from the blanket but from the simple closeness of sharing it. The edge of the fabric brushed his arm, and I felt a mist of electricity ripple quietly through the air between us. We weren't touching, not quite, yet it felt as if a thin invisible thread had connected our shoulders, drawing us just a little nearer. We watched the film for a while in comfortable silence. The old western on the screen showed dusty trails, campfires, and the kind of long-lost landscapes that felt strangely similar to the land outside his window. Every now and then he made a soft comment, pointing out an actor he recognized or mentioning how the movie filmed certain horse scenes. His voice was warm, steady, a gentle rumble that slipped easily into the quiet of the room. "You know," he said after a particularly dramatic scene, "I always wondered what it'd be like to have someone to watch these old films with. Someone who actually enjoys them." I smiled. I grew up watching them with my grandfather. They always made me feel like the world was bigger, like there was room to breathe. He glanced at me, slow and thoughtful. "You look like someone who hasn't had room to breathe in a while." The comment hit deeper than I expected. I swallowed before answering. "Yeah, I guess life in the city feels loud, messy. Everyone rushing. Everyone pretending they're fine." He nodded knowingly. "Out here you can't really pretend much. The land don't let you. You feel how you feel. You live how you live." I found myself relaxing a little more, leaning back against the headboard. Without drawing attention to it, he shifted closer, letting the side of his shoulder brush mine, just the lightest touch, but immediate and grounding. Neither of us moved away. "And you?" I asked quietly. "Do you ever feel alone out here?" He let out a slow breath, eyes still on the screen. "I do. More often than I care to admit. This ranch used to be full of people, family, hired hands, friends. Now it's just me most days. Silence is easier when you've got someone to share it with." Something in my chest tightened, not in sadness but in recognition. The loneliness he described wasn't heavy, it was familiar, honest. It made him feel human. Real. We sat for a long moment like that, the quiet hanging softly around us. The blanket warmed the air between our arms, and the shadows of the film danced lazily across the walls. Then, his hand reached for the bowl of popcorn on the bedside table at the same moment mine did. Our fingers brushed, light, accidental, but enough to make both of us freeze, caught in the sudden spark of contact. He looked down at our hands briefly, then up at me. His eyes held a gentle question, not pushing, not demanding, just asking if the moment meant something. I didn't pull my hand away. He didn't either. The tension shifted then, still soft but deeper, like something unspoken had settled between us. His thumb brushed lightly across the back of my hand, a barely there movement that sent a warm shiver through me. When I inhaled, the air smelled faintly of pine, worn denim, and the subtle warmth of his skin. "We don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," he said, voice lower than before. "But you can. If you need to." I hesitated, then found myself speaking more honestly than I expected. "I've been feeling lost lately. Like I don't really fit anywhere." "You fit here," he said quietly. The words landed with surprising weight. My chest tightened again, but this time with something closer to comfort. "And you?" I asked. "What do you want tonight to be?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the screen for a moment, then turned his full attention to me, his expression open and sincere. "I want company," he said finally. "Real company. Someone to sit with. Someone who ain't afraid of silence. Someone who ain't in a rush to leave." Heat spread through my chest at the softness of his voice. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't expecting anything. He was simply telling the truth. And somehow that truth made everything inside me settle. "I'm not in a rush," I said. His smile was small but real, one of those rare expressions that seemed to brighten the entire room. The movie continued, but neither of us really watched it. Our shoulders leaned together now in a quiet, natural way. Every breath we took rose and fell in unintentional rhythm. The closeness wasn't dramatic or bold, it was slow, quiet, and warm, the way comfort sneaks in when you aren't expecting it. At one point, the cowboy turned slightly toward me, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're good company," he murmured. "So are you." He chuckled softly. "Ain't often anyone says that." "Well, I don't lie about stuff like that." He let the words sink in. Then, gently, he let his arm rest against mine, solid, warm, and reassuring. Outside, the wind shifted softly through the grass. Inside, the air between us felt electric and peaceful all at once. Neither of us named what was happening. We didn't have to. It was there, in the shared blanket, the quiet touches, the way our breaths slowed to match the easy rhythm of the old western playing in the background. For the first time that night, I felt something settle fully, deeply in my chest. A sense of being seen. A sense of being wanted. A sense that this night, in this quiet cowboy's room, something real was beginning. The movie eventually reached its final scenes, but neither of us seemed to notice. The credits rolled in soft white letters across the screen, fading into the dim glow of the lamp. The room had grown warmer, quieter, almost hushed, like the walls themselves understood something delicate was taking shape. The cowboy didn't move at first. He sat beside me, the blanket still resting across our legs, his shoulder warm against mine. His breath was slow, even calm, but when I looked at him, really looked, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not just kindness. Not just curiosity. Something deeper. Something he was fighting to put into words. The silence stretched, comfortable but heavy with meaning. Finally, he drew a slow breath and said quietly, "I ain't good at talking about feelings." I turned slightly toward him. "You don't have to say anything if it makes you uncomfortable." He gave a faint shake of his head. "No. I think I should. I think I owe you that much." His fingers tapped lightly on the blanket, a little restless, a little anxious. It struck me then, this strong, grounded man who probably faced storms and broken fences and long nights alone without flinching, was nervous. Because of me. He took off his hat, setting it gently on the bedside table, then rubbed the back of his neck as though searching for courage. "You're easy to talk to," he said quietly. "Easier than I expected. Easier than I felt with anyone in a long, long time." Warmth spread through my chest, but I kept my voice soft. "I feel the same." He nodded, his jaw tightening ever so slightly, not in anger but in effort, like he was trying to steady himself before taking a step he'd avoided for years. "I've been alone a long time," he continued. "Longer than I ever planned to be. Guess after a while you start believing that's just the way things are gonna stay. That closeness, companionship, all that ain't in the cards for you anymore." His eyes glimmered with a vulnerability I hadn't expected from him. "But then you showed up," he said. "And suddenly the house don't feel so quiet. The night don't feel so long. And I find myself thinking about things I ain't let myself think about in years." My heart thudded softly. My throat tightened. "What kinds of things?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He exhaled, letting out a breath that sounded like it carried months, maybe years, of unspoken feelings. "Wanting someone close," he admitted. "Wanting you close." His voice caught slightly. "Not just tonight. Not just for company. I mean it in a real way. The words settled between us like something fragile and powerful at the same time. A confession not wrapped in poetry or perfect phrasing. Just simple truth. He looked down at his hands, then slowly back up at me. "I don't want to scare you off," he murmured. "I know we just met and there's an age gap and maybe I'm being foolish. But you walked into this house and it's like something in me woke up." Pause. "I just needed you to know that." For several long seconds I couldn't speak. Not because his words frightened me, but because they hit deeper than I expected. He mistook my quiet for discomfort, and his expression clouded with regret. "Hal," he said softly, shaking his head. "Maybe I said too much. Maybe—" "You didn't," I interrupted, voice gentle but firm. He looked up, his eyes searching mine. I took a breath, feeling my own heart tremble with its own truths. "I'm not used to this either," I said. "I'm not used to someone being honest with me. Or wanting me. Not in a way that feels real." He watched me closely, careful, patient, giving me space to find my words. "I've been feeling lost," I admitted. "Like I don't fit anywhere, like I'm always trying to be what people expect. But here with you, I don't feel like I'm performing. I don't feel judged. I feel seen." His shoulders softened just a little. "But I'm also scared," I added. He nodded once. "Tell me why." "Because you're older. You've lived more. You know who you are. And I'm still figuring myself out. I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to be someone temporary." His expression grew tender, almost protectively so. "You ain't temporary," he said quietly. "Not unless you want to be." The room felt smaller then, not in a suffocating way, but in the way two people slowly begin closing the distance between them without needing to move at all. The cowboy shifted slightly closer, careful, deliberate, like approaching a skittish horse, giving it all the space it might need. His voice dropped low, earnest. "I ain't a skin for anything from you that you ain't ready to give," he said. "And I won't ever push you. But I can't pretend I don't feel something for you. Something warm. Something real." My breath shivered, not from fear but from the intensity of it, the honesty, the gentleness, the bravery it took for him to say those words. I swallowed slowly. "I feel something too. I don't know what it is yet, but it's there." A soft relief washed over his face, loosening the tension in his features. His hand rested on the blanket, palm up, open, a quiet offering. I looked at it for a long moment, my pulse thrumming. Then slowly, carefully, I placed my hand into his. His fingers curled around mine with a warmth that spread like sunlight. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. After a moment he said, voice barely above a whisper, "We can take this slow. Slow as you need." I nodded. "I'd like that." His thumb brushed the side of my hand, gentle, reassuring, steady. He leaned back slightly, exhaling a breath he'd been holding. "You got no idea how long it's been since I felt close to someone," he murmured. "And I don't want to lose that." "You're not," I said. "I'm here." His eyes softened with something like gratitude, something like hope. The tension that had been building all night shifted into something warmer, an emotional closeness that felt safe, grounding, and deeply sincere. The air around us felt heavier with meaning, but lighter with understanding. For the first time since arriving at his ranch, I felt completely steady inside my own chest. Say, wanted, say, and maybe, beginning to fall for the quiet man beside me. The room felt different after our hands found each other, warmer, quieter, as if something invisible had shifted into place. The cowboy's fingers, rough from years of ranch work, held mine with a surprising gentleness. Not demanding, not claiming, just steady. Like he wanted to memorize the shape of my hand, the warmth of my skin, the simple fact that I was there with him. After a moment he spoke softly. "You okay?" I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, more than okay." He let out a slow breath that sounded half relieved, half overwhelmed. The kind of breath someone releases when they've been carrying too much hope for too long. "Good," he said, leaning back against the headboard. "Just want to make sure." We sat like that for a while, hands resting together on the blanket, shoulders touching lightly. There was no rush, no expectation. Only a quiet closeness that grew deeper the longer we sat in it. Outside, the wind hummed through the tall grass. The house creaked softly as the night settled in around us. His home, once unfamiliar, now felt strangely comforting. I shifted slightly, leaning just a little closer, and he didn't move away. Instead, he lifted his free arm and draped it carefully behind me, not pulling me into him, just offering his warmth like a shelter. I eased into the space he created. My head rested lightly against his shoulder, and the quiet strength of him settled through me. I could feel his breath rise and fall slowly, the rhythm steady, grounding. His shirt smelled faintly of hay, soap, and something warm I couldn't name, something that felt entirely like him. "You feel tense?" he murmured softly. "Do I?" I asked, letting out a slow breath. City muscles." He chuckled quietly. "Takes time for this place to work him loose." I smiled against his shoulder. "So this place is good at that?" "It can be," he said. "When you let it. When you trust it." The way he said trust carried a second meaning, one meant for this moment, not the land, not the silence, but us. I shifted a little so I could look up at him. His eyes met mine, steady and warm. "You trusting me?" he asked gently. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't pressure. It was simply a question. A quiet invitation. "I am," I said. He nodded once, as if confirming something he'd hoped for but wasn't sure he deserved. He moved his hands slightly, his thumb brushing the side of mine in a slow, thoughtful motion. The touch wasn't bold, it was tender, almost reverent. "Feels good to hear that," he murmured. Night deepened outside and the lamplight softened, wrapping us in a golden cocoon. The cowboy shifted just enough to face me fully. His expression wasn't intense, it was open. Vulnerable in a way that felt rare, like he was letting me see a part of him he didn't show easily. "I ain't had someone sit this close to me in a long while," he admitted. "Not like this. Not in a way that feels honest." "It feels honest to me too," I said quietly. "You sure?" I nodded. "I wouldn't be here if it didn't." He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders loosening. "All right. Good." His hand slipped away from mine only long enough for him to adjust the blanket around us. Then he let it rest on the slope of my arm, warm and grounding. The touch wasn't bold or possessive, it was protective. A silent statement. "I'm here. You're safe." We fell into conversation then, not heavy truths but small stories, soft memories. He told me about the ranch when he was younger, how his parents used to host neighbors for weekend cookouts. How the house used to be full of laughter, boots stomping on the floors, voices echoing through the halls. How he'd never expected to end up living here alone. "Thought by now I'd have someone to share it with," he said quietly. "Didn't think I'd be watching movies in my room by myself every night." I looked around the room, imagining him sitting here alone, keeping himself company with old films and long memories. The thought tightened something in my chest. Not pity but a kind of yearning to fill that space with warmth again. "I'm glad I came here tonight," I said softly. He glanced at me with a small, almost shy smile. "Me too." His arm around me tightened just a little, drawing me a fraction closer. My head rested comfortably against his chest now, the steady heartbeat beneath my ears soothing in a way I didn't expect. It felt natural. "Right. You comfortable?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah. Very. Good." He shifted again, this time letting his fingers trace small gentle patterns along my arm, barely their movements that sent warmth down to my fingertips. The touch wasn't meant to ignite anything except closeness. A quiet intimacy that felt deeper than words. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a moment. "Of course." "You scared of getting close to someone older?" he asked. His voice wasn't insecure, just curious, careful. I thought about it for a long moment. "Not scared," I said finally. "Respectful of it, aware of it, but not scared." He seemed to consider that, nodding slowly. "I get that. I don't want you feeling like you owe me anything because I'm older or because I invited you here." "I don't feel that," I assured him. "I'm here because I want to be." His expression softened again. He looked down at me, the corners of his eyes crinkling with something tender. "Feels good hearing that," he said quietly. "Really good." The warmth between us grew, not hot, not rushed. Just deep, slow, expansive. He rested his forehead lightly against the top of my head, his breath warm in my hair. The gesture was gentle and protective, the kind of closeness that said more than words could. "You got a good heart," he murmured. "I can feel it." I let my eyes close for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle inside me. "So do you." He let out a soft, almost disbelieving chuckle. "Ain't heard that in a while." "Well, you're hearing it now." He brushed his hand slowly down my arm again, a quiet reassurance. "Glad you see me that way." The room felt smaller now, filled with warmth and trust. We didn't kiss. We didn't rush. We simply stayed close, two people finding comfort in each other's presence. A slow-building intimacy. A shared breath. A quiet promise forming in the space between us. And as the night deepened, I knew, this wasn't just company anymore. This was connection. Growing steady, real. The ranch house had grown completely still. The only light in the room came from the soft lamp beside the bed, casting warm, golden shadows across the cowboy's face. The blanket draped around us held the faint heat of our bodies, the quiet mingling of breaths, the slow rise of trust. We weren't rushed. We weren't tangled in anything confusing or unclear. We were simply close. And yet, inside that closeness, something important was shifting. The cowboy's arm rested around me, slow and protective, his fingers occasionally tracing soft circles on my shoulder, an absent, thoughtful movement that felt more like instinct than intention. I let my head rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Each thump seemed to echo something inside my own chest, sinking in a way that surprised me. After a long moment, he broke the silence with a voice low and careful. "You're thinking hard." I lifted my head slightly. "You can tell?" He gave a small smile. "I can feel it. The way you breathe. The way your shoulders tense a little when you got something on your mind." I hesitated. The truth was right on my tongue, but saying it felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. He felt it too, he must have, because the hand on my shoulder paused, waiting rather than encouraging. "I'm afraid," I finally whispered. His expression changed in an instant, not startled, not defensive. Just deeply attentive. "Of what?" I swallowed. "Of wanting something I'm not sure I'm allowed to want." His brow creased and his voice softened so much I could barely hear it. "You're allowed to want whatever your heart wants. Ain't no rules against that here." "But what if I get hurt?" I asked quietly. "What if I make a mistake? What if you realize later that this, whatever this is, isn't what you really want?" He took a breath, slow and heavy. His hand slid down my arm, not to pull me closer or push me away but to anchor me. "Listen," he murmured, "I don't do this with people. I don't sit with them like this. I don't open up easy. And I damn sure don't say half the things I said tonight unless I mean them." He paused, eyes steady on mine. "I want you. Not for a moment. Not for a night. I want you because something about you feels right to me. And I ain't scared of saying that." His honesty hit me with such force that my breath caught. He saw the reaction and gently cupped the back of my neck with his warm hand, his thumb resting just below my jaw. The touch wasn't demanding, it was grounding, reassuring. "You're safe here," he said softly. "You ain't making a mistake by feeling something real." My chest felt tight, full of something warm and overwhelming. "I'm not used to people choosing me," I admitted. "Not like this. Not genuinely. Not without expectations." The cowboy's jaw tightened, not with anger at me but with something like protectiveness. "Then let me show you what it feels like," he said quietly. "To be wanted for who you are. Not for what you can give." I felt the emotion rising in my chest before I could stop it. Not sadness, something gentler but equally powerful. Vulnerability. Hope. Fear. All tangled together. He saw it all. And instead of shying away, he leaned just a little closer, his forehead brushing mine, a feather-light touch that made the world around us fall away. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You ain't alone. Not tonight." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of him wash over me. When I opened them again he was still there, steady, patient, present. "I want this," I said finally. "I want you. But I'm scared of what comes next." He nodded, the slightest motion, his breath warm against my cheek. "Then we take it slow," he murmured. "Step by step. No rush. No pressure." My hand found his, fingers slipping gently between his own. He squeezed back, firm and reassuring. "You sure you want this too?" I asked quietly. He gave a soft, almost incredulous laugh, like he couldn't believe I'd even need to ask. "I ain't been this sure about something in years." His eyes softened. "You walked into my home and made it feel alive again." Warm tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the way his voice trembled ever so slightly on the last few words. "You did that just by being here," he added. A silence settled between us, not empty, not tense, but full. Full of everything we'd said and everything we hadn't yet found the courage to voice. Finally, he tilted his head slightly, brushing his temple against mine. "Tell me what you need," he murmured. "Right now. What would help you feel steady?" I took a breath, opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know how to explain it. Words felt too small. So instead, I slid closer to him until my chest rested fully against his. His breath hitched, surprised but soft. His arms came around me automatically, one hand settling between my shoulder blades, the other around my waist. He held me the way someone holds something precious, carefully but with quiet certainty. This, I whispered against his chest. I just need to feel close. Not rushed. Just close. He exhaled, long and slow, resting his chin lightly on top of my head. Then that's what we'll do, he said. Just be close. Nothing more. We stayed like that, our breaths slowly sinking, the quiet trust between us deepening in ways that didn't need explanation. I'll be here tomorrow, he murmured. If you want. And the next day. And the day after that. I ain't going anywhere. The words felt like a promise. A steady one. I pulled back slightly to look at him. His eyes caught the lamplight, warm and unwavering. You won't change your mind? I asked softly. He shook his head. Already made it. I want you here. I want this. His hand brushed a stray strand of hair from my forehead with a tenderness that made my heart ache. And I want you to come back, he added, voice low and sincere. I felt something bloom inside me. A sense of belonging. A sense of possibility. I will, I whispered. His thumb brushed my cheek, slow and reassuring. Good. Because I ain't done getting to know you yet. The emotional distance between us collapsed then, not with dramatic words or sudden declarations, but with a slow, deep surrender to something real. Something gentle. Something that had been growing since the moment I walked into his home. The turning point wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet, steady and honest. And it changed everything. The first light of morning crept softly through the window, brushing the room with a delicate, golden glow. The prairie beyond shimmered under the rising sun, and the air smelled crisp and clean, filled with the faint tang of dew and wild grass. The quiet was different than the night before, lighter, more awake, but it still held a sense of intimacy as if the house itself had exhaled with us. I stirred slowly, feeling the warmth beside me, the steady presence of the cowboy's body. He was still, breathing evenly, a quiet reminder that some things, trust, care, attention, don't need words to exist. I shifted just slightly, careful not to disturb him. But his hand moved automatically, brushing the back of mine, fingers entwining in a way that felt like reassurance even in sleep. When he stirred and opened his eyes, the soft morning light revealed the faint shadow of yesterday's emotions lingering on his face. There was a calm in his gaze, tempered by the vulnerability I had glimpsed the night before. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, sharing a silent acknowledgement of everything that had shifted between us. Nothing had been forced. Everything had been earned in quiet moments, in gentle touches, in words spoken softly at just the right time. Morning, he murmured, voice husky but gentle. Morning, I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. There was something unspoken in that single word, a mixture of comfort, hope, and lingering excitement about what lay ahead. He shifted a little, allowing me space to sit up, and pushed the blanket around our shoulders like a shield against the chill. Outside, the prairie seemed endless, but inside, the room felt safe, grounded, and filled with possibility. You slept well? He asked, his tone careful, almost shy. Better than I have in a long time, I admitted. Thanks. His lips curved into a small, quiet smile. Good. That's good to hear. We lingered in that quiet morning space for a few minutes, letting the soft light fill the room and our minds. There was no need to rush. The world outside could wait. Here, in this moment, there was nothing more important than simply being together. Eventually, he rose to make coffee, moving with a practiced ease that only years of routine could bring. I followed him to the small kitchen, watching as he set the kettle on the stove, poured water into the French press, and moved about the space with a calm confidence. The smell of coffee began to fill the room, mixing with the lingering scent of the prairie air that had followed us in through the open window. I busied myself with small tasks, picking up stray items, helping set out cups, and watching the way his hands moved, strong, steady, capable. There was something mesmerizing in the simplicity of it, the quiet way he lived in this world and made it his own. Sit, he said gently, motioning to a small wooden table by the window. I'll pour. I did as he asked, settling into the chair and taking in the view. The prairie stretched endlessly, wild and open, bathed in the early light. The sky shifted in colors of gold, rose, and soft blue, and I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. There was freedom in this place, yes, but also a sense of grounding, of connection to something larger than ourselves. He poured the coffee carefully, handing me a cup with a small, tentative smile. Here. Warmth first, words later. I chuckled softly, taking the cup. The liquid burned slightly against my lips, but it was the comfort in the gesture that warmed me more than anything else. We sat there together, sipping slowly, letting the quiet stretch between us. Conversation returned, but it was gentle, soft, and honest. He told me stories of his mornings on the ranch, the way the horses would greet him at the gate, the sound of the wind through the tall grass, the way the sun hit the fields in early light. I shared small fragments of my life too, memories, dreams, fears, all the pieces I hadn't shown anyone for a long time. And he listened, truly listened. Not out of politeness but because he cared. At one point he stood and motioned for me to follow him outside. The air hit my face like a splash of clarity, cool and sweet. The prairie stretched in all directions, golden and endless. Horses grazed quietly in the distance, their soft whinnies carried on the wind. The world felt enormous, but I felt small in the best way, safe, supported, connected. "This is where I come when I need perspective," he said softly, gesturing at the horizon. "When the world feels heavy or confusing, I step out here and let it remind me I'm still a part of something bigger." I nodded, understanding immediately. There was a rhythm to this life, a calmness in its simplicity that city chaos could never offer. And yet, the most profound part wasn't the open land, it was that he was sharing it with me. I glanced at him, noticing the subtle lines on his face that spoke of years of labor and life lessons, the quiet strength in his stance, the gentleness in his gaze. "I can see why this place means so much to you," I said softly. "It's grounding." He looked at me, his eyes catching the sun in a way that made them glow with warmth. "And now it means more," he said quietly. "Because you're here." Something in my chest tightened, not from fear but from the sweetness of the moment. I realized then that this connection, this bond, was different from anything I had felt before. It wasn't just companionship. It was trust, respect, and the beginning of something lasting. He walked closer, his hand brushing lightly against mine. "We don't have to figure everything out today," he said. "Just enjoy this moment. The morning. The quiet. Us." I squeezed his hand gently. "I like that. I like this." The sun climbed higher, spilling golden light over the fields, the house, and us. It felt like a blessing of sorts, a promise that whatever came next, this day, this place, this connection was real. Something solid, something worth nurturing. We returned inside eventually, the world outside still vast and open, but the house now felt like a small sanctuary. The quiet intimacy we shared the night before hadn't disappeared. It had grown, strengthened by shared vulnerability, gentle gestures, and the simple act of being present with one another. Before I left the kitchen, he paused and looked at me, eyes steady and warm. "You'll come back, won't you?" I smiled, the certainty in my chest stronger than anything I had felt in months. "I will. I want to." He gave a quiet nod, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Good. Because I've got a lot more to show you. A lot more to share." And in that moment, as sunlight poured into the small ranch house, I realized something important. The night, the trust, the closeness we had built, none of it was fleeting. It wasn't just a momentary escape from the world. It was the beginning of something lasting. Something real. I took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the house, the prairie, and the cowboy's presence fill me completely. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to step forward, into this day, into this connection, and into whatever this relationship was quietly becoming. By mid-afternoon it was time to leave. The sun had climbed high over the prairie, casting long golden shadows across the fields and the dusty path leading away from the ranch. I stood beside the cowboy's truck, my bag slung over my shoulder, feeling a mixture of reluctance and anticipation. Even after a night and morning together, I hadn't fully realized how much his quiet presence had settled something restless inside me. He stood next to me, tall and steady, hands loosely resting on the tailgate. His hat shaded his eyes, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze, the unspoken words hovering just beyond reach. The ranch, the horses, the endless sky behind him, they all framed him in a way that made my chest tighten. He wasn't just a man, he was home. And part of me didn't want to leave. "You'll come back," he said finally, his voice soft but certain. I nodded, feeling a smile tug at my lips. "I will. I promise." His eyes softened, the smallest smile brushing his lips. "Good. Because I don't plan on letting you go. Not so easily." There was a quiet honesty in his words, the kind that doesn't need proof. Just trust. Just presence. Just shared understanding. And I believed him. I wanted to. We lingered for a moment, neither speaking, simply feeling the weight and warmth of our connection. He stepped closer and for a second the world outside, the prairie, the distant hills, the swaying grass, seemed to fade away. All that existed was the space between us. "I mean it," he said, breaking the silence, voice low. "I want to see you again. And I want more than just a night or a morning. I want to know you, really know you. I want that too, I admitted. My words felt small compared to the depth of the emotions swirling inside me, but they were true. I want to see where this goes. His hand found mine, fingers curling naturally around mine in that quiet, grounding way he'd perfected over the last 24 hours. Then we take it slow. Step by step. No rush. Just steady. Honest. I felt a warmth spread through me, the kind that made everything else fade to the background. I like that. I like steady. He gave a quiet laugh, soft and relieved. Good. Because steady's all I know how to do. We fell silent again, watching the wind move through the tall prairie grass. It seemed symbolic somehow, free, unhurried, patient. Just like he wanted us to be. And I realized then that patience wasn't just a lesson about land or horses, it was about people, about relationships, about letting things grow naturally. I'll be back in 2 days, I said finally, testing the promise with my voice. I'll make sure of it. He nodded, his eyes glinting in the sunlight. I'll hold you to that. And when you come back, we'll see where this goes. No pretending. No playing games. Just us. I let out a quiet laugh, full of relief. I think I'd like that. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face, and his touch lingered slightly longer than necessary. I like that too, he said, his voice low and steady. More than you know. I took a step back toward my truck, still holding his hand for just a moment longer. Neither of us wanted to let go, not fully, not yet. But we both knew that leaving didn't mean ending. It meant anticipation. It meant trust. It meant the slow building of something real. I'll miss you, I said softly, though my heart knew the feeling wasn't permanent. It was a promise, not a goodbye. Good, he murmured, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Because I'll be missing you too. We shared one last lingering look, the kind that spoke volumes without words. Something unspoken passed between us. A mutual understanding, a shared desire, a seed planted carefully and deliberately. It wasn't dramatic and it didn't need to be. It was enough. I climbed into my truck slowly, feeling the heaviness of parting, but also the lightness of connection. He stood there watching me, his posture relaxed but his eyes never leaving me. The sunlight made the gold in his hair shine faintly, and the warmth of his presence stayed with me even as I turned the key and started the engine. I'll see you soon, I said, leaning slightly out of the window. He tipped his hat in return, a slow smile on his face. 2 days. Don't be late. I won't, I replied, and I meant it. The truck rumbled down the dusty road, kicking up a faint cloud of dust that shimmered in the sunlight. I glanced in the rearview mirror once, catching sight of him standing there, tall and steady, a solitary figure against the vastness of the prairie. And for the first time in a long time I felt a sense of belonging, not to a place, not to a routine, but to a person. A connection that promised to grow slowly but surely. The miles stretched between us, but the distance didn't feel like separation. It felt like space to anticipate, to reflect, to look forward to the next time. 2 days would pass and then I would return. Not as a visitor but as someone who belonged, even in a small way, to this ranch and the man who had welcomed me into his life so completely. I let out a slow breath, feeling the excitement and calm mingling in equal measure. I didn't know exactly where this relationship would lead. But I did know one thing. It was real. It was steady. And it had begun with honesty, trust, and quiet intimacy. And that was enough. For now. For tomorrow. For the days after that. The road ahead was wide and open, much like the prairie behind me. And just as the prairie promised endless horizons, so too did the connection between us, slowly growing, deepening, and forming the beginnings of something lasting. I smiled, feeling the warmth in my chest, knowing that this was only the start.